Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 4-game series against the Kansas City Royals. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson, back from his trip into the great unknown. And he comes back with a great series out of his Minnesota Twins, taking 3 of 4 from Kansas City at Target Field. Yet, Dan, I'm looking at the standings here, and this is a very confusing year for the AL Central. The Twins just took 3 of 4 from the Royals. They're 6 games above 500, and yet they're 3 games back from Kansas City and 6 games back from the Guardians. What is happening?
I think the Central's good, which I do need to say, you said I went into the great unknown. I was at a group campsite where I could hear the cars on the highway right next to it, so let's not call it the great unknown, but yes, I think the Guardians are actually a good baseball team. I think this Royals team is actually a pretty good team, too. I think the Twins are a good team. This is fun.
You think all 3 of those teams are actually good teams?
I think so. I mean, we're a third of the way into the season. Like, I think they're good.
That would be crazy. Like, if I told you that 3 teams made the postseason from one division, the AL Central is not, it's the 3rd division you would have guessed, Dan.
Like in the AL or in all of baseball? Yeah.
No, exactly. In the AL. 3 of 3.
So we'll see. I mean, obviously a lot of baseball left, but the nice thing is that they can't beat up on each other too much. And maybe that'll be the true test, right? Because you only get 12 or 13 games against each team in your division. A couple more things we wanted to talk about before we get to this really fun series win. You have a note here about a friend stealing coffee from the great Joe Mauer?
A buddy of a buddy. So there's a little hearsay here, but this is how the story is told to me. Ran into Joe Mauer at a Caribou Coffee, and his name is Joe also. He's a big Twins fan. He goes up to Joe, says, hey, Joe, love to see you. Go Twins. Love to have you on the team and whatnot. And then he goes to the counter. They have a little order pickup, and he picks up the drink for Joe. He gets to his car, and he realizes that it just says online order, Joe, item 1 of 3. So this man, he stole Joe Mauer's coffee, Dan. Now, the only thing that I'm sad about this is that we don't know that this was Joe Mauer's drink. But if you're curious, because that was the first question I asked, was what on earth is Joe Mauer drinking? And the drink he had was an almond milk vanilla latte. Now, Dan, as longtime Twins fans, Joe Mauer was the face of Kemp's Milk for years, Dan. There's no way that in his retirement, he's drinking almond milk, right? I mean, he drank it straight out of the gallon jug in those commercials, Dan.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good right there.
It's got to be Maddie's drink. It can't be Joe's. Like, it has to be hers. Which you set this up. So do you remember in the Metrodome when there was the big milk jug down right field line?
Yes.
And I always thought it would be so cool if instead of just lighting up, it just spouted milk all over, like a
long-time
volcano
listeners
of milk.
Of the show will know that this has been a bit on the show. Like, it hasn't been for like the last 2 seasons. We've never once talked about this, but like season 1, season 2 of the podcast, Dan brought this up like every other episode. This milk jug at the Metrodome that he just really, really wanted it to explode milk when a home run was hit.
We have a couple other. None of these are connected. I mean, it's just a very random list of opening notes.
I can make a segue here, Dan.
All right, go ahead.
So my friend stole Joe Mauer's coffee, and speaking of stealing, Dan, Royce Lewis in his rehab start, first time he gets on base, he steals second base. And the front office and Rocco are absolutely livid.
You were the chosen one!
So Rocco's on the phone, I'm sure flailing his arms at exactly the wrong moment as he does when he's angry, because he doesn't understand that emotion. So he's sort of like, he's AI trying to mimic the human anger emotion. But anyway, he gets on the phone with Royce and says, stop stealing bases. You're not even supposed to be running at 100%. Now you're stealing bags? What's going on down there, Dan?
Royce just wants to show what he can do all the time. But yeah, this is an odd, like a rebuke, I would say, of the front office a little bit here. This is Royce showing who's boss. Well, we should go on here to this wonderful series win for the Twins. Let's go to the recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan, Twins come away with this one 6-5, but that score is very misleading because the Royals scored 4 in the top of the 9th inning, and that will be a trend, Dan, that we'll see for the rest of the series.
Yeah, the Twins get the scoring started in the bottom of the third where Eddie Julian kind of singled down to left field. It was kind of like past the third baseman who didn't really expect him to hit it there. And then Jose Miranda launched the next pitch for a home run. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then again in the bottom of the 5th, Castro and Julian get 1-out walks. Miranda strikes out looking on a full count, but then Larnach picks him up with a 3-run blast that was almost Wallnerian, hitting it up where Matt Wallner had hit that home run last year.
I don't know that Matt Wallner is enough of a household name that you can use his name in a... Is that a verb? Is that how you
I don't
used
know.
it, really?
It didn't work very well. He's got a weird name to add an IAN to the end of it.
I mean, Jim Tomian would probably work a little better. I mean, a more household name than Matt Wallner, who's currently at the Saints batting like .046 or something. Like, he got sent down and did exactly what he shouldn't do if he wanted another shot at the majors.
Well, the Royals get one back in the top of the 6th. They just string together 3 singles, but otherwise, Joe Ryan is masterful in this game. 7 innings, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts. His ERA is down to 2.96. We're going to talk about him a little bit later, too. And then in the bottom of the 8th, the Twins add a run on a Kirilloff single that MJ Melendez caught but couldn't quite hold on to, which also followed a Bobby Witt Jr. drop. It was like the Royals had kind of quit playing, and that really proved important because of what happened in the 9th.
The top of the 9th got crazy. I was at this game also, and we actually met up with our third chair Hogs at the game, so it's fun for our kiddos to talk and whatnot. But so we were watching this, and it was so fun because in the 9th inning, when you're up 5 runs, you're not really paying attention. And this game got way too exciting, Dan. It was absolutely too exciting because Cole Sands comes in, which we're going to talk about Cole Sands later because I don't understand this. But he gets 2 outs, and then he allows 3 hits, and it's 6-2, and you got runners on. Duran enters, and you're thinking, okay, here's the guy. Also, his walk-in stuff, not as exciting. Not as exciting in the day. When there's no license, everyone's like, get your cell phones out for no reason whatsoever. But anyway, so Duran comes in, you're thinking, okay, they're going to shut it down. But my goodness, Duran hits a batter. Then he gets 3 weak contact balls, but one, there's no play. The second one, Castro has an error. And then, thank goodness, Dan, I assumed this was going to be a nightmare because Bobby Witt Jr. comes to the plate, and on the first pitch, I'm thinking, oh no, how many times has this kid burned us? He's going to burn us again. But no, weak contact right back to Duran, tossed to AK for the out. And my goodness, Dan, the relief that was felt in that stadium was something to behold.
It felt a lot like, was it last month or against the Angels when Mike Trout came up to the plate in a similar situation? Yes. And I think grounded to third pretty softly. So I'm trying to hang on to those moments for all the times that Bobby Witt Jr. really just smashes the Twins in those spots because he had a clutch hit that we'll get to in Game 4 as well. But let's move on to Game 2. The Twins do win this game 4-2. They score a couple runs right off the bat. Though I wanted to say first, Kyle Isbell with the Royals, and we're going to get to know him. He looks like he was just in a very ugly bar fight. When it turns out he just... Yeah. It was on Saturday, I think. He fouled a ball off of his face. Like, that's one of those geometric things. You're like, how is this even possible that you could hit a baseball off your bat and into your face? But he toughed it out. He played most of the series.
Well, I don't want to say it's completely his fault, but he swung at a ball that was like 6 inches in off the plate, Dan. Like, that's the only way that you could hit yourself in the face is if you swing at a ball that would have hit you anyway.
This is you're the guy who put Kyle Farmer on his bench after he got hit in the face by a baseball. So
he went 0 for 12 in the series, Dan. Who else should have been on the bench?
Anyway, the Twins do get on the board, bottom of the first. Margot has an infield single. This guy won't go away. Correa doubles down the line.
I love how you're complaining that he's successful, Dan.
Well, I want them to make this easy with Royce coming back. Like, cut Margot, but you can't because the guy's getting a little bit better. Anyway, Jeffers strikes out, but then Miranda has a single with the infield in, which is big, scores a couple runs, and then bottom of the third, Buxton actually, I don't know, he ran inside of the lane a little bit, and Pasquantino left with an injury. Now, it turned out to be okay. He came back a couple games later, but do you think he was out of line?
It was strange because I don't know if Pasquantino stayed on the base without jumping up for the ball, that Buxton would have taken the line that he did. However, it was Buxton's back leg that clipped him. I do not think this was intentional. I'm not saying that even a little bit. Buxton didn't mean to do this. However, I do think there was a bit of a mental lapse because it didn't look like Pasquantino's leg was where it shouldn't be, right? Like, it looked like it was on the outside of the bag, and where Buxton was running, to me, Dan, looked like Buxton's in the wrong here. Like, he should have been toward the outside of the the bag. I understand that you're trying to beat the throw, which he did, by the way, but you still have to think about where that first baseman's leg is.
Well, and luckily it wasn't a knee-to-knee collision, and so, Pasquantino was okay. So I think it's less of an issue. Twins get another run in the bottom of the fourth when Farmer's thrown out stealing second, but then there are doubles by Vasquez and Margot to get that third run. The Royals were able to get 2 runs off of SWR in the top of the fifth. We're going to talk about him a little bit later, but he does get a win after his outing. And then from there, the Twins get 4 shutout innings from the bullpen, just 2 hits, both of them ironically off Duran. And, in the end, a nice win here for the Twins.
Yeah, a really clean baseball game, and the only one where there wasn't like, oh my goodness, some big moments here where it's like, what's going to happen? Are the Royals going to fight back? Even the hits that Duran gave up, I never felt as nervous in this game as I did in games 1 or in game 4.
There were a couple interesting moments, though, that I want to go back to. So in the bottom of the fifth, nothing comes of this, but Buxton hit a triple to the left center wall. And man, he looked so good running. And this was such a good sign after he spent that time on the injured list. And then in the bottom of the eighth, a weird sequence here where Buxton walks and he steals second, just his second stolen base of the season. Bobby Witt Jr. had a really nice play. He's so fun to watch, to keep Buxton there kind of catching. It was either the ball that was thrown in from the catcher or on a pickoff move. I forget. It was weird because Bobby Witt Jr. had some bonehead plays in the field, and then he also had some great plays. And then Castro advances Buxton to third with a grounder. Julian singles, and then Julian steals second. And I thought of you, David, because you've talked about how, awkwardly you might step on your daughter's toys and kind of tumble forward and maybe, land on the couch mercifully. But
yeah,
this was a weird collision with Bobby Witt.
I loved the slow-mo replay, Dan, because it showed where Julian and Witt Jr. made contact in 3 different ways. So the first one is Julian's head goes directly into the buttocks of Bobby Witt Jr. And then their sides sort of touch. And then the best one is Julian, because of the way that his head hit Witt Jr.'s butt, he barrel rolled. And Witt Jr. is now basically doing a scorpion. And so his legs are coming up and they whack Julian in the back. And the best part of the slow-mo is you can just see Julian's Canadian expression of ouch. Oh, like you can
Canada.
a very fascinating to play to watch in slow-mo, certainly.
There were so many plays in this game. It was a weirdly exciting 4-2 baseball game.
So top of the ninth gets a little bit interesting, Dan, because Salvador Perez, who again is not 50 as we all think he is.
I'm not dead.
Yes, no, he's not dead, not quite yet. But Buxton is going back to play the ball. And what's fascinating about this is he realizes that I'm not going to be able to make this no matter how high I can jump. If he had gravity boots on, he wasn't getting to this ball. But what I loved, Dan, is that he put on the jets, right, to get himself away from the wall to be able to play it. Now, Perez still made second easily, but if Perez had not taken it seriously as trying to make it a double, I think that Buxton could have gotten it because he played that ball as well as he could. A very difficult play to make.
Salvador Perez must be the slowest player in baseball, though, because he doesn't score on the single here by Frazier on the next play, which proves big, and then Dairon Blanco comes in to pinch run for him. And this was interesting because Blanco tries to steal second, and Vasquez makes his one. I guess he had 2 good plays this whole series, and he throws him out, and he purposefully, I think, throws kind of to the first base side, and Correa does his. I think I've seen it called a slap tag to get him out, and of course Perez is not trying to steal, and then very suddenly, first and third with nobody out becomes 1 out, runner at third in a 2-run game. Huge. Changed the whole direction of the series in some ways.
A lot of ways there was a big momentum shift here. Now that's sort of funny because they lose game 3. But anyway, Duran strikes out Melendez and then Nick Lofton grounds out 3-1. And Duran gets his 8th save. He's 8 of 8 this year in saves and opportunities. Is that accurate?
It is, because the 2 times he's gotten blasted were actually not in save situations is when that happened. They were in tie games. And so he didn't technically blow the save. I thought that was interesting too.
See, that's one of those misleading figures because you're like, oh yeah, he's 100% in save opportunities. But it's but that's not what you mean. That's not the same question. It's a philosophical issue here, Dan, is that you're asking a question where the answer that you receive may be accurate from a numbers perspective, but not in a truthful way, Dan. Not in a truthful way.
Well, we can go through game 3 pretty fast. A bit less exciting of a game. The Royals get to Ober. We're going to talk about that later. He is pegged with all 6 runs and a 6-1 loss. Twins' lone run comes on a deep Miranda sac fly early on when it seemed like kind of the Twins were maybe going to be able to break the game open. Otherwise, all Royals. Royals. We did get to see the debut of Diego Castillo, who pitched a couple scoreless innings of release, so that was good. And Seth Lugo. Seth Lugo, in my heart, in my memory, is a journeyman kind of starting pitcher. He's tied for the league high with 9 wins now. His ERA leads the majors with 1.72, and this is one of those guys where, he signed a 3-year, $45 million contract. Like, that's the kind of deal the Twins could assign somebody to. It's just, and I'm glad for the Royals' sake and the Royals fan base that they were the ones that got him and he's pitching well. Like, I think that that's great. And we've read some things about how he has helped the younger pitchers on this really good Royals starting staff right now. But it's like, that's the kind of signing you want to make.
Yeah, you got to guess right, though.
Well, that's,
right?
Yes.
Because
totally.
like you said, to be fair, like I would put Lugo sort of in that Sonny Gray category where like he's had some good seasons, but it's sort of like up and down, up and down. But no one's surprised now that Sonny Gray is raking with the Cardinals. So we shouldn't be that surprised that Lugo could figure it out and get this job done. One other note here, though, Dan, about that Miranda sac fly. Miranda thought he hit it out and he watched it. And it's sort of like, dude, when you're playing against a Cy Young candidate, you best make sure it's out before you slow walk to first base.
Kind of a Dick Bramer play there, wouldn't you say?
I was going to say Josh Donaldson, but that works. Yeah, either way.
There we go. And then we move to game 4. The Twins win this one 7-6. The Royals actually score the first 4 runs of this game. Vinny Pasquantino, back from injury, hits a 2-run home run in the first to give the Royals a 2-0 lead. Bobby Witt doubles in another run in the top of the third. And then in the fourth, Melendez hits a home run. It's 4-0. But your guy, Ryan Jeffers, leads the comeback.
My goodness, bottom 4th and bottom 5th for the 11th and 12th homers of the year, cuts the lead to 4-3. And I have to be honest, Dan, the Twins had won 2 in the series. They were down 4-0. I was not convinced that this was going to be a realistic win for the Twins. So to see Ryan Jeffers just be like, nope, you know what? I'll carry the team. No problem, team. Was just so great to see, especially because he's been in a little bit of a slump here. He went 2 for 4 in game 1 and then game 2 and game 3. I'm sure he'd like to forget. We'll talk more about Jeffers a bit later. Without those 2 homers, obviously, I think just the morale of the team would have let this team go quietly into the night, which is not what we want to see, Dan.
The big inning for the Twins is the bottom of the 6th, where Castro gets an infield hit, and then he goes to second on the play as Witt Jr. probably makes a throw he ought not. I think he probably should have eaten that ball, but that's crucial because then Kepler comes in as a pinch hitter. He hits a single to left center and scores him, and so it's 4-4. And then a couple walks later, Correa clears the bases with a 2-out triple in just, I think it was only his second at bat with the bases loaded this season, but he triples into the right field corner. It's 7-4 Twins. And then until the 9th, it's fine, but it gets dicey again. Duran has an error with a low toss to first. They actually gave the error to Santana, but I would say this is just as much on Duran as not making a good throw. That leads to an extra at bat. Witt hits a 2-run double. Again, the tying run comes to the plate, but Duran gets another shot.
I am not throwing away my shot.
With a comebacker by Pasquantino, almost the same play as he muffed earlier. He's able to make the throw to first, and he gets his 3rd save of the series, and the Twins win.
3 saves in one series is nuts, Dan. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a bit later. Let's go ahead and jump into what is continually now, Dan, my favorite segment.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett.
Puckett's Picks Winner.
You're on a remarkable run. This was, I think, your 7th win in the last 8 series now, David, but there's a couple things. So you picked Buxton, who had 3 points. I picked Kepler, who had 2. Hogs picked Kirilloff, who had 2. The listeners picked Correa, who had 2. And Kepler had another point here in game 1, but they changed the ruling to an error. And so then I could have won this. Anyway, you get the win. David, you have 10.5 points now on the season. Hogs has 4.5. I have 3.5, and the listeners have 2. You put us all together, we can't even tie you.
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm happy that you did, Dan.
Oh my gosh. All right. I don't want to spend any more time in this segment. I don't want to give you the glory. So let's go on here to Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun.
Yeah, as I sort of alluded to, I'm going to give this to Jeffers. I know that he only went 4 for 14 in the series, but game 4 was all Jeffers. And like I already said, there's no way the Twins win this game without Jeffers putting them back into contention to win it. And I just think that with the way that Rocco manages, we've talked about this before, they won 2 games. They'd say, oh, you know what, a series split in a 4-game series isn't that bad. I just love that Jeffers' sort of sausage mentality, oh my goodness.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
What are you trying to say over there, Griffith?
I wanted to combine sausage and mentality into like one word, because like Jeffers is the guy behind the sausage. It just couldn't be done. I don't think those words are meant to be combined, Dan.
Anyway, I mean, there's a big difference between winning a series 3 out of 4 and splitting it 2 out of 2, which I guess is
I'd
obvious.
say about one game, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I understood. Anyway, you're not going to like this, but I'm picking Jhoan Duran as my beast, and you will quibble, and you will say that he struggled in all 3 of his outings, and you would be correct. But the bottom line is the man pitched for the 6th game in 9 days. His velocity is back. It seemed like, they made some tweaks with his mechanics. There's always those little, he didn't even have to go to Seattle to Driveline to figure this out. Pete Mackey was able to help him. And I just think to have your closer be able to actually close that down, is big for this team, and hopefully he can rest a little bit and then get some big wins against the Astros.
But in which of these outings did you think, oh yeah, that was a great outing?
I'm not saying that, but he locked it down. He got the job done in the end.
No, he didn't lock it down. That's what I'm saying. He didn't do that, Dan.
He got the save. He ended the game. There was a little S with a comma and then a number after it in the box score.
Which, did I not just mention to you, Dan, why that's so misleading?
Yes, you did. But I'm still sticking with it because he was an iron horse. Could Rocco have done things differently? Yes, he absolutely could have. But Rocco can't know what's going to happen tomorrow. He can only hope to know what's going to happen tomorrow.
I don't even know. We don't have time to get into this, Dan. Who do you have on your bench?
So I actually went with Vasquez. And this is kind of a body of work kind of thing because I know he had a couple hits, but his OPS right now is .413, and he is a major league catcher. And I get that, Jason Castro has been a catcher, and he was never great, right? There's been other Twins catchers in the past who weren't awesome. But if you're going to DH Ryan Jeffers as much as you are because you want him in the lineup, that means that Vasquez has to play, and he's got to be better than that. Can we get the OPS up 500 or something like that? Just a little bit more out of Vasquez, and maybe a hit in a key spot.
I mean, that's just a touch higher than Ariza's batting average currently, I think.
Right, absolutely. So anyway, what about you?
Yeah, I got to give it to Ober here. I mean, this was an embarrassing outing. Now, granted, as we mentioned, Lugo is just untouchable at the moment. If the Twins were going to lose one game, game 3 is likely the one they were going to lose. But what made this so frustrating is the Twins got on the board with 1 run, and I don't know how many more you're going to hope to get against Lugo, but Ober didn't keep him anywhere near the game. I mean, 6 earned runs, Dan. His last 3 starts have been rough. He had a good outing against Toronto, his 4th start ago, but I want to see him back, going 6 and allowing 2 earned runs. None of this, 5 or 6 earned runs and only 4 or 5 innings of work. It's not good enough, especially because the Twins are really relying on him to be a guy who's going to pitch in the postseason, Dan. So before we go to Rocco's Rewind, kind of an exciting thing. So we have been a one sponsor show for a long time, and the Grand Group, we absolutely love them. They're still our sponsors. We're not getting rid of them. But Dan, as the show grows, thankfully, again, thank you so much for the listeners. We love seeing the numbers continue to increase season after season. We decided to expand our base and offer some new sponsorship spots to new sponsors. And one of the places that I reached out to, Dan, is literally my favorite pizza place in the Twin Cities, which is OG Zaza. So they have a place, well, you're going to learn about it in an ad, Dan. Why don't you go ahead and tell us all about it?
Well, David, yeah, surely you know that when something is the OG, it's special. The original. It's where it all started. And that's what OG Zaza Pizza is. It's pizza as it was meant to be. Located inside Potluck Food Hall at Rosedale Center, OG Zaza serves up New Haven-style pizzas, Caesar salad, and big-ass breadsticks that are literally 2 feet long. For the month of June, all pizzas are $10 after 5 p.m. every day of the week. You heard that right, just $10. So stop in and take advantage of this delicious deal.
Yeah, so the Lil Roni would be what I would suggest. Fantastic. They put so much pepperoni on it, Dan. Like, you can't even see the bottom of the pizza. All you see is pepperoni. And folks, this isn't like OG Zaza came to me. I reached out personally, and I said, I love your pizza so much. I would love to talk about it on the show. So we'd love to have them on board. Go ahead. If you do stop in, if you can tell them that you heard about them on Min for the Win, it'd mean a lot to us. And $10 for one of their pizzas. This is an artisan pizza that you can taste the difference, Dan.
Well, that's actually, ironically, a great segue into what I want to say in Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
So, it's the 5th inning. I guess it must be after the top and into the bottom, because Joe Ryan is shown in the dugout by cameras having one of those little squeezy applesauces, right? That, like, our kids eat. And I don't know why this bothered me, but like, Rocco, I'm going to pin this on Rocco. What is Joe Ryan doing eating little squeezy applesauce? Like, surely there's another snack he could be having.
You put this on the note sheet, and I didn't understand what it had to do with Rocco. That was my first question. I'm like, do you really think Rocco is getting on the team bus and saying, okay, does everyone have their snacks? Like, do you think that's what's happening?
That's
here,
what I'm
Dan?
wondering. That's why I asked the question, because that's what it seems like to me.
There's probably 7 people in the Twins clubhouse who are in charge of the snacks, and I assume Rocco is not one of those people. But I guess my question is to you, Dan. If Joe Ryan is pitching well, I don't care what he eats. Like, he went 7 innings pitched and he gave up 1 earned run. You want him to buy the Costco-sized applesauce jug and, like, have somebody walk out, have TC Bear come into the dugout holding this jug of applesauce and have Joe Ryan hold out a batting helmet so as not to dirty a dish and eat out of this. Is this what you're asking for, Dan?
Yeah, maybe one of those little ice cream batting helmets. Like, that's what he could use. It's a great sponsorship opportunity. Anyway, I have one other one I wanted to talk about, and it's brief, but thank you, Rocco, for letting SWR stay in Game 2 to face Bobby Witt Jr. in a key spot with runners on base. He got him out, and more importantly, it allowed him to finish 5 innings, unlike the last start where Rocco pulled him with nobody on base, no threat out there, with 4 2/3 innings pitched. So thank you, Rocco, and SWR, congrats on the win.
I don't even know what to do with that segment, Dan. That was just a lot of just everywhere. I'm going to actually talk to Rocco. So explain to me the role of Cole Sands and Jorge Alcala out of the bullpen, because I don't understand it. Sands shows up as a long relief guy, and he also shows up when the Twins are up 2 in the 9th. Like, somebody explain to me exactly what's happening here. So you use Sands in Game 1, and then Duran had to come in to bail him out. Now, granted, this one makes a little bit more sense because you're up 6-1 before the 9th inning. So that seems to make a little bit of sense. And then same in Game 3, you used him. So now we understand. I don't want to see Cole Sands in a high leverage position again, because earlier in the season, we were seeing him in these weird spots. And if I was confident that Rocco wasn't going to go back to using him in high leverage situations, I wouldn't feel the need to say this at all. Secondly, Alcala, please keep him on this team. He's pitching very well. I think in Game 4, you could have saved an arm. He only threw 13 pitches in Game 4. And the other day, you let him throw like 50 pitches. Again, I just don't understand, like, shouldn't guys have sort of defined roles in a bullpen for a team that's as successful as the Twins are this season, Dan?
Yeah, but they're missing a guy like Brock Stewart, who was kind of that third lockdown arm. I think, Alcala hit 100 miles an hour in this outing. If he can be that guy, that would be fantastic. We've been calling for him to be that guy literally for 2 years.
Yes, definitely. With that, Dan, let's go on to the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
I'll go first chronologically, but it's a bigger question than that. Jose Miranda's Game 1 home run, I thought, just showed us what he can bring to this lineup. He's playing a decent third base, but you got Royce Lewis playing at AAA right now, obviously eager to come back up to the Major League club. Can you send Miranda down at this point, the way that he's playing?
I am not throwing away my shot.
I don't understand what you're supposed to do, but Miranda better not go down, because he's one of the more consistent hitters on the team right now. It would make very little sense for them to make that move, and especially if they just want to do it so they don't send down Margot, who, again, hasn't fulfilled any of the roles that they intended them to fill. I understand that he's had a couple of good hits in good spots, but that's not enough to keep a guy who really isn't seen as very valuable outside of very, very small instances.
I think you've got the big moment, though.
Yeah, so Game 4, bottom 6, obviously, Correa comes up, and what I loved about this, it's a bases-clearing triple, and he does it on a 3-1 count, Dan. He knew he was going to get a ball to hit.
Clever girl.
And he went the other way. Watch this replay, folks, and watch the way his eyes follow the ball to the bat, and then on the follow-through, Correa was intentionally hitting to that part of the field. It wasn't like, oh, you know how some guys swing and they get a ball going the other way, and it just seemed like it just happened to work out that way based on how they swung, not really intentionally. This was as intentional as it gets as a baseball player can be when a ball is being thrown 90 miles an hour at you.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the Carlos Correa we've been wanting to see. Well, let's go on here. We've got more things to talk about in our Maurer's Musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Maurer's Musings.
So I want to talk about 2 starting pitchers with my question here. Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan. So Pablo Lopez's ERA right now is at 5.25. It's a little higher than it was at this point last year. And Joe Ryan, whose ERA is 2.96, which I think is lower than it was last year. Who do you think actually will end up with a lower ERA?
Joe Ryan looks untouchable, man. And Pablo had to go through such a great stretch last season to bring his ERA down. I think repeating that and bringing his ERA as low as it was last season is going to be very difficult. And if Joe Ryan stays healthy, Dan, and if it truly was a groin injury last year where he started to give up, 8 home runs a game, I think that this guy is going to finish the season just with impeccable numbers. I think Joe Ryan finishes the year better, Dan.
So do you think Lopez will get his ERA down to under
Yes.
4? you think?
Yeah, I think that's realistic, but he's got to start now. Like tomorrow night, he makes his start against Houston. He had a big game there in the postseason last year, obviously. Tomorrow's a great night to turn it around for Pablo. And show us why you have your own day, Pablo.
What is your question here?
Yeah, so is it too early to talk about trade deadline acquisitions, Dan? Because clearly this AL Central team, I don't know how much clearer this picture is going to get come the trade deadline. Like, it's a couple of months away, certainly. However, I don't know. If this division is as good as you say it is, Dan, will the Twins be buyers, sellers, or holders at this point at the deadline?
I was wondering what your angle would be. Okay, so it's not who they should go out and get. It's just kind of their approach to the deadline at this point.
Yeah.
They are a playoff team at this point if the season ended now, which makes them, I think, a buyer. I think the question will be, what holes are they going to have? Because right now, you could argue maybe they need an extra outfielder, somebody to replace Margot on the roster. But I don't know. Maybe another bullpen arm. But it is too early to get too deep into this. But I think at this point, they're going to be buyers.
I think they're holders. I don't think they make any big moves, Dan. Unless they get into the first position of the AL Central, I think that they hold and they don't do much.
Well, let's keep going here in the series grades.
Series grades.
David, I'm going to try to make this brief. Since you guys mocked me on last episode and when I wasn't here to defend myself. Advanced Retreat, I'm just going to call it a 10 out of 10. Jeffers was better. They beat a team with a winning record. I thought that they looked generally pretty good doing it. So 10 out of 10. I think as far as well-played baseball goes, I'm just going to resimplify to the one category. I'm going to call it an 8 out of 10 for a couple reasons. They were 8 for 35 with runners in scoring position, which is all right. That was enough to win them these games. 30 strikeouts across 4 games, which actually for this team, it has become kind of the norm. They've lowered that average down. It feels like it's more like 7, 8, or 9, not 10, 11, 12 per game like it was before. And no runs allowed in the 6th, the 7th, or the 8th inning. I get that there were some in the 9th, but if you're going to hold teams without runs in that gives you a chance to come back. Why are you chuckling? Those are key innings that you don't want to score runs in.
I know, it's just so funny that you're like, but in the 9th, I guess they gave up a couple
Well,
of runs.
yeah, I mean, that was a problem. But that's why you have Duran to lock it down, right, when you get to the 9th inning. So it adds up to 18 out of 20, which is an A-.
Well, then we agree. I'm giving them an A- again because I think they won all of the games that they should have won. It's a little disappointing that, they couldn't even keep it competitive in Game 3. Again, it's the Royals' ace on the mound. You're sort of expected to struggle in that particular outing. I guess it just would have been nice to see a closer game, a 3-1 loss or a 3-2 loss as opposed to a 6-1 loss because Ober couldn't get himself put together.
But that's kind of splitting hairs. Well, hey, lots actually that we want to talk about in Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Where to start? A couple just quick hitters. So Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to miss the season with an ACL injury, he plays for the Braves. He's one of the best players in baseball. It just makes me sad. Kind of like Mike Trout going down. That's kind of what that feels like to me.
Yeah, I'd say a bigger deal than Mike Trout going down right now because the Braves are obviously much more competitive than the Angels. And Acuna he's just a fascinating player to watch, Dan, with that season last year. Stealing every base that exists is just insane.
Another injury update, actually, and also a former Twin update. Jorge Polanco went to the injured list with the Mariners with a hamstring injury. His OPS this year is only 595. You look at this trade where the Twins got Topa and they got Desclafani, however we say his name there. I mean, nobody from this trade is playing in the majors right now.
No, this was a trade that at the time we celebrated. We thought, oh my goodness, look how much we got for Polanco. And we have yet to see anybody who we got for Polanco play at the major league level for the Twins.
Another note, Angel Hernandez, the much maligned MLB umpire, has retired effective immediately, which was a little surprising to me.
For some reason, I don't think that Angel came up with this plan on his own, Dan. I think that he's been bad for a long time, but at this point, it's unforgivable, honestly. And because there's no recourse when he's behind the plate to do anything, because there's no challenges on balls and strikes, you can't have a strike zone, Dan, that's literally, 50 inches across. It's just insanity. Any slider that starts anywhere near the plate, he's calling a strike, and you can't have that at the major league level.
Another note here, and this one, I think, listeners, if you're interested, you should go look this up. There's a lot more to this story than what we have time to talk about. But the Negro Leagues will now be included in Major League Baseball's official statistic database, which means that Josh Gibson is actually going to replace Ty Cobb as the leading hitter in Major League Baseball history. Again, lots of layers to this, just in terms of finding reading box scores from some of these and which games count and which don't. But it is a pretty fascinating development.
Yeah, it's, I've never been one to dive into like the early seasons of baseball and like go back through those statistics. Like clearly we know a lot of the names because they've been on top of the leaderboards for so long. It will be interesting now when you go back and you're looking over lists that you've seen before and there's names on there that you don't recognize. So it'll be interesting from a historical standpoint and from just a baseball fan perspective to understand the history of those leagues that were working right alongside what we considered Major League Baseball with players who were just as good and obviously in some instances much better.
And then we have to leave one final note. So Jorge Lopez, who we praised on this podcast just a few episodes ago about his bounce back year for the Mets.
Whoopsie.
This is the former Twins reliever and Orioles reliever. He was an all-star with the Orioles. He lost his cool a couple nights ago, just a little bit. Now, the broader context is that the Mets are bad. They've lost something like 11 of their last 13 or 14 or something like this. And so he takes his glove as he's already been tossed for arguing with the third base umpire. He's not even arguing with the home plate umpire. He takes his glove on his way out and he tosses it over the netting and into the stands, which takes like more precision than just, oh, I'm mad, I'm just chucking my glove. It was more calculated. And then afterwards in his post-game interview, things that we cannot repeat were said to reporters. And then the next day, the Mets cut him. And just quite the odyssey for Jorge Lopez. I don't know. What do you think about this situation?
Before the show, we listened to a clip just talking about how he's got a lot of stuff going on in his personal life, and that doesn't mean we should excuse his behavior. But it is sort of remarkable that we just talked about what a fantastic season he's had, an episode or two ago, and now he's out of a job. Like, how does that happen? I mean, it just shows how quick things can change for baseball. That is, Dan, it's a fickle sport.
Well, we have one last segment here. Let's go look forward to the Astros series with our Puckett's picks.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Puckett's picks.
Yeah, so the listeners are going to take Castro off the board. Dan, it looks like you're going with Kepler?
I picked him last series, but I'm sticking with him. So, yes, I'm going with Kepler. Hogs picks third. He's going to take Carlos Correa.
I want to build a championship culture.
And that leaves you, David.
Yeah, I got to take Byron Buxton, I think. If you guys are going to let him fall to me,
would
with
you
the
stop
great
with
outing
this
he had.
if you're going to let him fall to me stuff? Who are we supposed to pick right now on this team? You just won with 3 points. So let's stop with the, I don't know who to pick here. Oh, you guys are just letting players fall to me. Come on.
I won with Byron Buxton.
I know, but
and
I'm just
now
saying.
I get to pick him again.
All right.
What do you want me to say? It seems pretty clear to me.
Just come up with another insult is all I want, right? Some other
It's
little
not an
ribbing.
insult. I'm just wondering. I don't understand it. Like,
Oh my gosh.
the way that it's gone,
So condescending.
there's been multiple times in this win streak, Dan, where
Attempt to be a gentleman.
I've got to take the same player 2 times in a row after they gave me a victory. That's not on me, Dan. That's on you people.
All right, thank you for blaming me on this. Anyway, I'm
blaming everyone, Dan. You, hosts, the listeners. It's not just you, Dan. Don't feel singled out. Everybody's terrible.
Well, David, I think since I'm back on this episode, I'm going to go ahead and send us out.
Please do.
Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win. You can find our Min for the Win Facebook page and Instagram page. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platforms so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Link is in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvas and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.